Hi everyone, good morning and good afternoon to all. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. We are going to start in the next 30 seconds. Please stay tuned with us. I welcome you all to the FutureBridge webinar on next generation biomaterials from scientific breakthrough to scalable value creation. Before we go ahead, allow me to introduce ourselves. I am Dipti Balan, a senior consultant from FutureBridge Personal Care and Life Science Practice. And today, joining with me is my colleague Rupali. About myself, I'm working with life sciences, personal care, and consumer health companies. The stakeholders that are coming from R&D, innovation strategy, consumer market, commercial, and BD&L teams to support them with techno-commercial intelligence and opportunity assessment. Happy to connect with you all today. I now invite Rupali for her quick introduction, and then we will get into the subject of the webinar.
Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar. I am Rupali Singh, working as a research specialist at FutureBridge. I work closely with pharma and personal care brands, providing foresight, advisory, and opportunity assessment outputs.
Thank you, Rupali. Let me briefly introduce you to who we are and what we do. FutureBridge is an advisory and consulting company supporting various industries on the future of industry from a perspective of 1 to 25 years. We cover the future of industry, technologies, platforms, markets, business models, competitions, and regulations by using our proprietary frameworks, program data, and relationships with different networks. In this webinar, we will talk about why biomaterials matter now. So let's go ahead and let's look into it. In this webinar, first we'll talk about why biomaterials matter now, get into the details about what's changing in biomaterial space. Then we will talk about the value creation by players and which areas have more value. And then finally, we will take a glimpse of the areas where winning is important and where one should play to win. Towards the end, we'll be happy to answer any specific questions that have been put up in the chat box. So please put up your questions in the chat box. And if the time permits, we'll take all the questions. And if not, then we'll circle back via our webinar email response. So let's get started with the chapter 1. That's about biomaterials. Let's start with why now. Because the science here isn't new, but the conditions for it to scale absolutely are. Now, before we understand where we are going in biomaterials, you have to first see the arc of where we have been. And it falls into roughly 5 generations. The first generation was bioinert, the do not harm era. Materials like stainless steel, basic polymers were precisely chosen because the body would ignore them. The second generation became bioactive materials that could actually bond with the tissue and provoke a helpful biological response. Then came the third generation, biointeractive materials that communicate with surrounding tissue and actively guide healing. Now we are stepping into the fourth and the fifth generation. The fourth generation is smart and responsive materials that react to their environment, to pH, temperature, or mechanical stress. The fifth still is an emerging, is one that generally changes the game. Living, adaptive, and personalized biomaterials. These are composites of living cells integrated with synthetic scaffold materials that can self grow, self repair, self organize, and adapt over time. So the trajectory is unmistakable. We are gone from materials that do nothing by design to materials that do everything by design. And that shift is happening at the same time as the market is expanding rapidly. Now, why does this matter commercially today? There are 3 forces that are converging. First, the market. The global biomaterials market is already $200 billion, growing at 15% plus annually. Now, that is not a niche, that's called a compounding large scale market. North America is the largest market today, followed by the Asia Pacific, that is still seen as a fast growing market. The second demand drivers underneath that growth are structural. Now, this includes an aging population, rising chronic disease burden, expanding healthcare, investment and infrastructure, and real technological advances in R&D momentum. These don't reverse next chapter, they build for decades. Third, the trend is moving towards biodegradable and bioresorbable materials. Growing adoption in regenerative medicine and rise of smart biomaterials can eventually be seen. Now, I would be unfair to only show you the good things. Let's look at the real constraints such as high cost of biomaterial based products, persistent biocompatibility, and adverse reaction risk, and a stringent complex regulatory approval process. The opportunity is definitely enormous, but so is the execution challenge, as you can see. And this is not happening in just one industry. These same platforms are beginning to show up across multiple healthcare markets. What you see here, this is an important view which shows that many biomaterial innovations are not single use technologies. They are becoming platforms. Take smart biomaterial here that you see is smart hydrogels. They appear in wound dressings, tissue scaffolds, or stimuli responsive drug delivery. Then we have bioactive coatings that can be relevant for bio or you can say antimicrobial device coatings, drug eluting surfaces, or functionalized delivery interfaces. Then we have ECM derived bioengineered scaffolds that supports regenerative grafts, vascular scaffolds, tissue engineering, and organoid models. Last, the fourth one we have is AI enabled material design that can influence implant materials, scaffold optimization, formulations, and delivery system. We have also seen bio based polymers. And the insight here is that the value is shifting from individual products to reusable capability platforms. That matters because a platform that works across multiple indications can create a strategic value than a single specific application for a material. In other words, biomaterials are becoming a convergence point across medtech, regenerative medicine, drug delivery, life sciences, and even sustainability. And this convergence runs into one shared gatekeeper, that is regulation. The good news is that the regulatory landscape is itself evolving and broadly in a constructive direction. Three shifts are matter. First, global harmonization. These frameworks across regions are aligning, which lowers the friction of taking a product worldwide. Second, strengthen biocompatibility expectations. The FDA risk based approach paired with the updated ISO 10993-1 2025 standard. Yes, the bar is higher, but so is it's also clearer now. And the third being propose EU MDR and IVDR simplification, easing a transition that has frankly been a bottleneck for many innovators in Europe. So the system is moving from fragmented compliance towards harmonized risk based evidence driven frameworks. It raises the bar on innovation, but in exchange, it improves long term global market access. Rupali, I'm excited to understand what's changing in the next generation biomaterials.
So, yes, Deepi. Now that we have covered why this matters now, let's talk about what's actually changing in what these materials can do. This slide shows the expanding property set of next generation biomaterials. We are no longer only talking about durability and compatibility. We are talking about faster recovery, improved performance, reduced infection, smart response, real time monitoring, personalization, etc. That is a major change. I would group these properties into four broad shifts. First, the materials are becoming responsive. They can react to temperature, pH, enzymes, pressure, or the local biological environment. Second, they are becoming integrative, supporting cell adhesion, tissue regeneration, vascularization, or mechanical matching. Third, they are becoming functional, delivering drugs, reducing infection, monitoring healing, or repairing microdamage. And lastly, the fourth, they are becoming personalized and designable, increasingly shifted by AI, 3D printing, and patient specific data. We can say that we are no longer choosing materials, we are programming them. Let's go ahead to the next slide. We can see that biomaterials are moving us away from one size fits all implants towards smart, patient specific solutions. For faster recovery, materials like shape memory polymers, bioresorbable scaffolds, and bioprinted osteogenic constructs are designed to reduce surgical burden, support regeneration, and avoid follow up procedures. For better performance, 4D printed adaptive constructs, porous hybrid implants, and biomimetic scaffolds aim to match mechanical, biological, and anatomical requirements more closely. For personalized care, patient specific implants, AI guided scaffold design, and point of care manufacturing can support more individualized treatment pathway. Now let's look at who's actually building this. So Deepti, can we please move to the next slide? So this is where the science becomes real products. A wave of startups is turning these biomaterials into approved, funded clinical stage solutions. For example, Titium has the first FDA authorized sutureless light activated bioresorbable polymer for peripheral nerve repair, and Geneface won FDA clearance for its self assembling collagen scaffold in wound care. Others are also advancing fast. Aspect Biosystems bioprinted immune protective tissues, Call Plant's 3D printed regenerative breast implants from recombinant human collagen, Stentix dissolving vascular stent, and High to Care's injectable hydrogel that forms a cartilage repair scaffold in about a minute. Moving on, now that we have seen what's possible and who is building it, let's move to who and where the value is being created. Here we can see a map of stakeholders. You will see the big established companies like Stryker and Medtronic, the chemical and material suppliers like BASF, and the small specialized inventors. The major value pools cluster around four application areas: orthopedic and joint, cardiovascular, wound care, and ophthalmic. Each pool has its own major players, its own clinical evidence requirements, and its own reimbursement dynamics. The strategic implication here is that the biomaterials is not one market you enter. It's a set of distinct application pools, each requiring a different go to market. Now, moving on to the other slide. So, here the biomaterial platforms attracting capital share a recognizable set of capabilities. Three of them are table stakes. First is clinical differentiation, which means a genuinely distinct therapeutic outcome. Second is translational readiness, that is a clear path from lab to clinic to commercial. And third, scalable manufacturing, because a brilliant material must be easy to mass produce. Then come the value multipliers, which include regenerative functionality, minimally invasive care, and long term cost reduction. And increasingly, a seventh, sustainability and circularity. Bio-based, low carbon, recyclable materials are now drawing ESG aligned capital. The signal here is sharp. Investors are no longer funding clever chemistry. They are funding de-risk pathways to scaled, reimbursement, reimbursable, and sustainable products. Now, let's see who is deploying the money. Funding in biomaterials is becoming increasingly diversified, with venture capitals, public grants, and strategic acquisitions, each playing a distinct role in de risking innovation and accelerating commercialization. Venture capital is seeding the frontier. Companies like Cellbricks with 10 million euros for 3D printed living tissues, Entirety Biomedical seed around for bioabsorbable magnesium orthopedic implants, bioactives on synthetic skin substitutes. Secondly, we have public and government grants that are de risking the science that's too early for pure commercial capital. For example, an NIH Phase 2 SBIR backing RevBio's injectable bone adhesive and a state funding behind Gel4Med's tissue engineering platform. And thirdly, we have corporate MedTech through M&A is where the exits happen. Haemonetics acquiring VivaSure Medical's bioabsorbable cardiac pads, Solvetum absorbing Acera Surgical synthetic ECM wound care matrix. So, Deepthi, now that we have talked about where the money is flowing and how innovation is being de risked, maybe you can now take us one step further and show how this is translating into real clinical solutions.
Yes, Rupali. Let me bring this to life through three before and after stories. So, folks, the first one that you see here is orthopedics, therapeutics, Pearl Matrix P15. The old limitation was autograft effective, but constrained by donor side pain, finite supply, age related decline, and no proven improvement in fusion speed across hundreds of US bone graft options. The next generation answer is P15 is a synthetic peptide matching type 1 collagen cell binding site. This is designed to accelerate early bone formation rather than simply act as a scaffold. The impact is that this appears to be statistically faster fusion than autograft. Twice as many patients fused at 6 months, FDA PMA approval in June 2025, and the first US patient treatment was already underway. The second story is about the wound care, which is from Steam Labs Architect FX ECM Matrix. Now, chronic wounds are protease rich, so conventional collagen dressings can degrade within hours. Architect FX uses bridge cross linking to stabilize the collagen matrix and resist premature enzymatic breakdown. Now, the impact here is that the longer functionality in hard to heal ulcers, this appears with clear FDA clearance that was seen in 2026. The third story is about ophthalmology. Precise Bio's PB001 3D bioprinted cornea. Now, the old problem was here in this case, corneal blindness relying on scarce donor transplants, limited by tissue shortages, uneven access, short shelf life, and variable outcomes. PP001 is a lab manufactured implant, 3D bioprinted from cultured human corneal cells, recreating native optical clarity with GMP and turning one donor cornea into many. The impact here you see is that this is the first in human implantation which was developed in October 29, 2025 at Ramban in a legally blind patient, which was in phase 1 as a milestone pointing towards scalable, storable sites restoring care. Now all these three fields follow same pattern. Old clinical limits solved through smart material design. So we know what's changing, right? And where the value sits. Now, here's the part you should actually act on. Where do you place your bets? So, let's see in the upcoming chapter. This is for me the most important aspect of our webinar because it turns everything we have discussed into a portfolio strategy. The core idea here is don't bet on one horizon, but sequence your bets across these three horizons that we are going to discuss now. First, being play now, this is a near term tier where we are saying the commercial ready tier. ECM collagen regenerative matrices that already have reimbursement and clinical evidences, reabsorbable polymers and fixation devices are expanding the adoption. Advanced antimicrobial surfaces as well. The winning move here is execution. Scale your GMP manufacturing, lock in reimbursement, and expand into the adjacent indications. Second tier is the midterm tier. This is build next, the scaling midterm tier. Biofabrication and 3D bioprinting, smart healing platforms with embedded sensors, AI guided discovery. Now, the winning move here is that standardize manufacturing, generate the clinical evidence, and deploy AI enabled material screening. Lastly, we have the long term tier. That what we call is position for the future, the emerging tier. Now, you see the living and cell embedded biomaterials or like 4D printed sharp adaptive constructs and in situ biomanufacturing at the point of care are some of the examples. Here, the winning move isn't revenue, it's building proprietary data sets, securing the platform IP, and partnering with leading translational centers. The discipline this demands that you concentrate your capital where evidence and reimbursement already exist. Fund the scaling tier selectively, and then take small, smart options on the future. This stops you from losing everything on a wild guess but lets you win if it works for you. So that's it from our end. And we are at the end of our webinar. But we have here two questions, that is, are next generation biomaterials ready for routine clinical practice or still mostly early stage?
So, Deepti, the answer is mixed. Some categories are already moving into real clinical use, specifically where the material has a clear device role, known workflow, and manageable evidence pathway. But more advanced living, adaptive, or highly personalized biomaterials are still earlier in the maturity curve.
Thanks, Rupali. Now, this is the most frequent question that we have seen we've been asked about is, can these materials scale and clear regulatory hurdles without compromising safety?
So the answer is yes, but only if scale and evidence are designed early. For next generation biomaterials, safety, manufacturing, and regulatory readiness are not downstream tasks. They are part of the product strategy from the beginning. So over to you, Deepti.
Yeah. Thanks, Rupali. So, yes, thank you all for joining us on this webinar. And we are pleased to have you on board on this webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And thank you so much. Have a nice day ahead. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.